Hi, I'm Fred Satilli. Accountability. 3 weeks ago, my friend Marc Angelucci was murdered. I'm going to tell that story, but first I'm going to tell two other stories, so there will be three in all. The first deals with another friend. About 10 years ago, Marc Angelucci, who was murdered, won a landmark case in California State Court. As a result of that, he asked me to attend the Los Angeles County Council on Domestic Violence, the DVC, to make sure that the dictates of that victory were being followed. I went every month for 6 years. During that time, the first story took place. In addition to me, other men went. One in particular was a brilliant guy who was a poor communicator. The council offers visitors 2 minutes at the end of the meeting for public comment, and after a while they cut that to 1 minute. Each month, this guy attempted to vent his frustration with the malfeasance of the DVC. Each month, he was disregarded, antagonized, and dismissed. His points were never heard. His frustration mounted. This council was so bad that when I showed up with a camera, they demanded that I stop recording. My right to record these public meetings is called the Brown Act or the Sunshine Laws. I told them that their demand was illegal. They told me they didn't care. I told them that I would put the camera back in the bag, but that they would get yelled at. I went to the district attorney, who responded with this. Dear Executive Board Member, the Public Integrity Division of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office received a complaint that the Executive Board of the Los Angeles County Domestic Violence Council violated the Brown Act during your meeting on September 8, 2011. We have concluded that for the following reasons a violation did occur. Because they are the governing body of a local agency, the Board of Supervisors is a legislative body subject to the Brown Act, California Government Code 54952A. The LAC DVC was created by the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors in 1979 and, as a result, is also subject to the Brown Act pursuant to Government Code 54964, Section B. Section 3 of the LAC DVC bylaws created as executive board and establishes that the board shall hold regularly scheduled meetings. Those meetings are subject to the requirements of the Brown Act and must be open and public unless one of the limited exceptions in the Act applies. Item number 7 on the agenda of the September 8, 2011 meeting of the Executive Board states Executive Session, Personal Matters, Follow-up, Olivia G. Rodriguez. Section 54957 B1 of the Government Code provides an exemption to the open meeting required for specified personal matters. Nothing contained in this chapter shall be construed to prevent the legislative body of a local agency from holding closed sessions during a regular or special meeting to consider the appointment, employment, evaluation, or performance, discipline, or dismissal of a public employee, or to hear complaints or charges brought against the employee by another person or employee unless the employee requests a public session. Any personal matter that does not fall within this exception, specifically listed in Section 54957B1, cannot be discussed in closed session. For example, the executive board meeting with the executive director for the purpose of being briefed on LACDVC issues, or to provide an opportunity for the executive board to provide instruction or guidance to the executive director would not fall within the narrow exceptions listed. During our review, it was determined that the closed session involving Olivia Rodriguez did not involve the appointment, employment, performance, evaluation, discipline, dismissal of an employee. As such, the closed session on September 8, 2011 violated the Brown Act. A review of other agendas and minutes of the Executive Board indicates that the closed session with the Executive Director on September 8, 2011 was not an isolated incident. The item appears on board agendas as a regularly occurring portion of the meeting. This confirms our determination that the violation was a result of a misunderstanding of the personal exception to the open meeting requirements and not motivated by an intent to deprive the public of information which it is entitled. As a result, this office will be taking no legal action other than to bring this violation to the attention of the Executive Board with the expectation that the Board will take the appropriate steps to correct the problem. In the future, any discussions between a majority of members of the Executive Board and the Executive Director must take place at a noticed and agendized public meeting unless one of the listed personal exceptions specifically applies. The Public Integrity Division will be reviewing future agendas and minutes to confirm that corrective action is taken. If you have any questions or wish to discuss the matter further, please contact me. Very truly yours, Steve Cooley, District Attorney. Well, they were told. And I'll tell you, month after month, they sure hated me. In a meeting later that year, they asked my friend and me to leave the room so they could conduct a discussion of a private issue. I again told them that this was illegal, so they called sheriffs and had us escorted out, again breaking the law. Eventually, he walked away from all this, which was the goal of the council. Like so many bureaucrats, they just wore him down. The reason I tell this is because the attendees at these meetings were typically 60 women. These women were trained and devoted to the recognition and remedy of domestic violence. They went to college. They were experts on confrontation and conciliation. But in 6 years, month after month, not one of them approached this man with empathy. His obvious cries, his effort to go to these meetings, an inconvenient situation, and to attend them and to put up with hours of their work just to have a minute or two to try to get through to them. All of that effort just fell on deaf ears. They just didn't care. The next story happened 2 weeks ago. I went to court to watch the action in a family law case. The case was simple. 4 years ago, a man and a woman began a divorce. Their home was sold, and the money was put in an escrow account, which a judge ruled was not to be touched by anyone. Recently, the woman's lawyer went to the account and somehow withdrew $85,000 from the account that was not to be touched by anyone. The man went to court to have the money restored, and the lawyer and his ex-wife to be sanctioned. He had no representation because his lawyer, Marc Angelucci, had been murdered the week before. And by the way, not only was he left hung out in the middle of a case, but a half a dozen other really big, really important, really high-profile cases. Also, those people were suddenly cut off from their incredibly effective lawyer, and what do you do at that point? But anyway, fortunately for this guy, he was a doctor of law, and as such was well able to speak the secret tribal language of law to the judge, sort of as equals. He was opposed by 3 lawyers, one of whom brought his wife and the other brought her boyfriend. It was bizarre. The older man lawyer, the younger woman lawyer was the daughter of the older man, and every time the older man lawyer spoke, he turned around and winked at the boyfriend. It was really, I don't know what it was. It was just inappropriate and weird, and especially with social distancing and all that, it was a really weird display. But the man presented his simple case. Remember, They put the money in the escrow account. Nobody was supposed to touch it. They took it out. Something has to be done. But the judge showed serious confusion. He put his hands on his head. He was like this. He's like, Though every supporting document was presented, the judge couldn't understand the case. He asked the lawyer who took the money. He asked that if that lawyer was specifically named as not supposed to take the money. And the man said, it doesn't matter. The order is that no one can touch the money. It's a judicial order. And the man who took the money is standing 6 feet away from me right here. He touched it. My ex-wife touched it. You got to do something about this. But the judge said, I don't understand. Was that lawyer specifically instructed not to touch the money? And once again, so the man said, no, how could he be? He was new to the case. The order was written 4 years ago. And then the judge said, well, there's just too much ambiguity, for me to make a decision, So he dismissed the man's motion. He threw the procedure out of court. The man told the judge that he proved his case. He said, look, I proved my case. I demand that you do your job or recuse yourself from the case. The facts are too clear and undeniable. He said, I want to state for the record that the judge must be under some undisclosed influence, to put it politely. Actually, I'm doing a disservice here. He told the judge that he was either incompetent or crooked. And then we thought it was the end. But then to my shock, the opposing 3 lawyers with the wife and the boyfriend, they asked the judge that since the case was dismissed, if it could be declared frivolous and vexatious, and as such, could they recover attorney fees for their preparation for the work and for showing up that day and all that. And they had actually created a itemized bill which was already filed in response to the judge's order. In other words, they didn't know how the judge was going to go with this, but they already filed a motion that they should be compensated by the man for him bringing the vexatious and the, what's the word? The, I don't know, it's for bringing the frivolous motion to court. Well, and I couldn't believe it when he said he bills at $690 an hour for this whole thing. He claimed that the man's frivolous and vexatious actions had cost his ex-wife over $1 million in legal costs, and that the combined assets of the marriage amounted to only half that. What lawyer would engage in such a ridiculous pursuit? Anyway, the judge did deny the request and kicked everybody out of the court, requesting that they come back at some later date. So you can imagine the frustration of the man in the first story. Now you can imagine the frustration of the man in the second story. Now, I'm only touching on tiny moments for the first guy, decades, and for the second guy, 5 years of this kind of around and around and around, this inability of the court to just take care of these things, expediently go through it, So, anyway, now I'm going to tell the third story. A man who was even more frustrated than the other two ran into the perfect storm. For decades, he had fought similar battles. He was also a lawyer, like the man in the first story. He wanted recognition for his pain. Like the man in the second story, he wanted remedy in court for simple issues. He got neither. He was very jealous of the success of Marc Angelucci in winning so many huge landmark cases. A distinction that was that Marc fought for other people. He had no case of his own. In most of these other cases, there are people who are fighting their own case. It's an interesting thing that a lawyer can win and a pro per litigant cannot. But I'm going off the storyline here. So the man was very jealous of Marc Angelucci, and he felt that he deserved the recognition that Marc had received. He couldn't come to terms with the fact that Marc could prevail and he couldn't. He really hated Marc for this, and a number of others, but especially Marc. Just like in the second story, he had a judge who was just careless, capricious, and dismissive with him. He understandably hated that judge. Then, the trigger for his decades of growing contempt for the world that had enslaved him was cocked. He was told that he had terminal cancer. His battle with this system that had made a mockery of his life would beat him now. Now, the game was changed. Time had run out. There would be no ninth inning home run for him. So his rationality changed. A judge can be capricious because she has nothing to lose. Now, he had nothing to lose. Now, he was the judge. He got on a train and went from New Jersey all the way to California, rented a car, drove to Marc Angelucci's home, and shot him right in the head. Then he went back to the train and rode the train all the way back to New Jersey and rang the doorbell of his judge. Her son answered the door, and the man shot him dead. The judge's husband appeared, and he shot him and wounded and disabled him. But he didn't continue the hunt. He fled. The judge was home, but in another part of the house. He then went to a place where he had grown up and ended the psychosis he had been driven to by shooting himself, robbing the system, the court system, of having the last word. There's a lot in the news these days, a lot of talk in the news these days about the forgotten man. A lot of talk.